Welcome back to Morning Express on this first day of August 2016. It's time for us to look at the dailies. Shortly, we're going to be talking about the importance of breastfeeding. And I remember not too long ago, there was a proposal as to where offices would, by law, be required to have a place where mothers can breastfeed and even have storage or even a place to express. So we'll be having that conversation not too long from now, because I believe breastfeeding nation is a healthy nation. But that's coming up. But for now, let's look at the dailies, and I'll start off with the Standard as usual, where the headlines is, I blew 7 million windfall and now I have nothing. I got nothing. That is from one, old man who got apparently 7 million shillings as a payoff for a piece of land that he owned. And this was because the government was building a dam in his area. But guess what? He actually has and lives like a pauper right now. Very sad state of affairs. And this also brings me to the question that we had this morning, and that's in regards to a new culture and phenomenon that we have here in Kenya of betting, which seems to be taking people by storm, literally betting their lives away. And of course, having 7 million in your pocket does not necessarily mean that you're capable of sustaining and using that money well. One would imagine that 7 million shillings as a windfall is good money and you could do something reasonable. But according to this man, what he says, he actually checked into a hotel, was paying 3,000 shillings per night, and lived in a hotel, bought a car, although he could not drive. And I mean, the list is endless. So, of course, one might be left chuckling and thinking this is more of a comedy, but it is true, and of course can be very, very serious. And he is not the only one. We do know that the government has been paying out quite a number of people. And this is in regards and in light of the SGR and other projects undertaken by the government, and that payoff not necessarily reflecting to a better life for those who have received that money. So there you go. I blew 7 million windfall and now I got nothing. Get yourself a copy of the Standard to see what that is all about. We also have a story on the front page, and you can see a nice sumptuous meal there. Politics of Ugali is the title. Truth about ever-rising cost of maize flour. Now, there seems to be something going on behind the scenes regarding maize flour. Remember, one of the biggest concerns that Kenyans have so far is the rising cost of living. And of course, that is reflected mainly on the food that we eat, and ugali being part of the staple food that we have in Kenya. Of course, there is a worry as to why the prices have been going up. Now, the millers apparently are hiking the prices, and their reason is that there is a shortage of maize. However, the government that stores huge amounts of maize has come out to say that they have released 1 million bags out to the millers, but only 700,000, no, actually, only 200,000 bags have been bought so far. Therefore, the government discounting the fact that there should be a shortage. There is no shortage of maize according to the government. According to the millers, that is the reason why the prices are being hiked. So, of course, the question here would be, who is fooling who? Details are in your Standard this morning. Still on the poor millionaires, on page 4 and 5, you've got a detailed story of some of the payoffs that have been given to Kenyans, but unfortunately have not translated to better lives, because despite them receiving huge lump sum amounts of money paid off to them by the government, they have not translated that money to improve their lives in any way. If anything, it has become worse, because you live a life that is literally out of reach, only to become broke and poor over a very short time. But we also have a lady, Elizabeth Nkuku, who has given details and tips as to how you can utilize a windfall or money that comes in lump sum. I remember one time being given a lesson on finances, on financial intelligence, and the gentleman that was giving us that lesson said that unless you know where you're going to put your money, you don't need it. So that, of course, might be the gap right there. Politics of Ugali and the Gulana Kulalu project coming up also on page 6 and 7 of the Standard. Hopefully tomorrow we're going to be having the water CS as our person of interest, and of course that's one of the things that we'd like to tackle and talk about, and it's the Galana Kulalu project, which seems to be a far-fetched dream and doesn't seem to be translating to what it was expected to be. Remember, we had the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the country not too long ago, and of course one of the things that we expect out of his visit is a partnership between the two governments to ensure that Kenya is able to utilize the water and the land that we have, and of course the sample and the example would be Israel, which is a desert, but actually are one of the biggest producers of fruits, especially oranges, which of course is phenomenal. On to page 10, matters politics. Jubilee MPs say proposals on IEBC will not work. And this, of course, is throwing a jibe at the Chord coalition, who apparently one of the proposals that they say would not work that has been proposed by the opposition is the fact that they would want the presidential results at the polling station read and announced at the individual polling stations. Now, according to Jubilee, this would not work. And the reason why they say it would not work is because it would polarize some areas. And of course, that's one of the debates that we'll have right here on Morning Express on the way it is, looking at possibly the strategy that we have for 2017. And of course, we do know on the spotlight has been the IEBC. And of course, with the Chord coalition saying that it is time the commission has left office for us to have free and fair election. We do know that there is a parliamentary select committee which is in place to have that debate, and would like to know whether they're making any progress or it is a reversal. On page 11, Jubilee Party lays out structure ahead of a launch. We do know that according to the president, a new baby is about to be unveiled, and this is a baby that has kept being postponed, almost being born, and somehow it does not happen. So come September, according to the ruling coalition, Jubilee, they are ready to launch the new party. We'll also be discussing that on the way it is to find out whether the structures in place are actually workable and whether having one huge merged party is actually a threat to democracy. Those are details, and we're going to be discussing that right here on Morning Express. Moving on now to the Daily Nation, where the headline is "Allow Cheap Loans, Raila urges Uhuru." Again, this is to do with the regulations that are coming up. And of course, apparently banks have been lobbying against this particular new rule and law that would ensure that we have more reasonable bank rates and profits that they make. And fearing regulation could eat into their big profit, banks offer to lend 2 trillion to small businesses at affordable rates, but unions and opposition argue that the tough law is the way to go. It is a tough law, and according to the Jubilee manifesto, one of the things that they had promised to do is to lower banking rates. When you take a loan, the rates that you pay, they had promised to lower that. So of course, that being part of the manifesto, all that stands between that law, that becoming law and not becoming law, is the president right now. It was passed through parliament, so it is just waiting for the presidential signature for it to be assented into law. Now, a very tragic and a very sad story also on the front page of the Daily Nation of the heavy price for a childless marriage. Now, there is a picture there, and honestly, it is gruesome and very painful to imagine that a man literally chopped off 2 hands of his wife and battered her. You can even see from the pictures on your screen right now, her forehead has been slashed. And this is because apparently she was not able to bear children. Although according to her, she also says when they visited the doctors, it was actually proved that it was him who had a problem. So very, very sad right there. And of course, it has been a matter of concern, the number of cases that we have of abuse within the family, even to a point where it becomes tragic, and it's on the increase for some reason or the other. So of course, something that needs to be arrested and stopped and nipped in the bud. Moving on now to page 3 of the Daily Nation. Humbled Kofi out of on bail after jail stint. Remember Kofi Olomide, who basically, apparently, according to some, released a new move for his song, and that was Teke. Kofi Teke installed Kofi Olomide. But of course, he was arrested when he got home and thrown into jail, but has been released. And of course, hopefully, that should teach him a lesson. Matters Politics again on page 4. Jubilee out to unite Kenyans, says Ruto as he taunts Raila. And of course, one of the things that the Deputy President has been highlighting is saying that the opposition seems confused, given that at this time they still do not have a flag bearer, or rather have not decided on who the flag bearer is for the opposition. So of course, the Deputy President taking full advantage of that and literally mocking them. Raila urges Uhuru to honor Jubilee pledge for cheap loans. Again, that is a story that continues in the Standard. In the Daily Nation, page 9, UNICEF warns against delay in giving breast milk to newborn babies. And this is a discussion that we're going to be having right here on Morning Express in just a bit. And the situation deprives the child of essential nutrients and reduces chances of survival, says UN agency and nutrition expert. And of course, given the day and age we are living in, we have less mothers who are breastfeeding by virtue of the fact that, one, they need to get back to work as soon as possible, but also changing trends and changing ways of life are forcing mothers not to breastfeed, which of course would not be good for the baby. We do know, and we've been taught and brought up knowing that baby milk is the best milk even for the child to even acquire immunity at an early age and avoid some of those infections that they get at a very, very early age. That's what we have for you on The Nation. Finally, finishing off with a star. The headlines is this man, Matiang'i. And of course, this is a man that has been on the spotlight for the last few months now. And this is because of trouble that has rocked the education sector. We now have a good number of schools that have been burnt down, and some have blamed it squarely on the education CS, Dr. Matiang'i. Now, an opinion poll by the Star shows 57% of Kenyans support the minister in school crisis. And of course, we know that he has come out with some very stringent rules that seem to be rocking the boat now. There are those who say those rules have literally shortcut and curtailed anyone that would want to get involved in exam cheating, which might be the reason why we have had schools being burnt down. Apparently, those cartels are behind the arson attacks that have been in schools. But that is one narrative that has been given. The other is, of course, that students are just outright disobedient. And because the cane was removed, they're literally just showing that nothing can be done. There are others who have said that, of course, the stringent rules is what has brought about chaos. There are those who say teachers have also neglected their duties. So there's all sorts of accusations being thrown left, right, and center. Now, so we're going to wind up our newspaper review this morning, but do stay with us right here on Morning Express. When we come back, we're going to be talking about breastfeeding, its benefits, and why mothers need to ensure that they breastfeed for as long as they possibly can. We'll be finding out what is the recommended period and time that mothers ought to breastfeed. So do stay with us right here on Morning Express.